Hello, everyone. This is Dr. Allison. Thanks for joining me for week 6. This week, we're going to focus on strategic planning. Strategic planning is at the root of what you'll be doing in Project 2, kind of combining all the things we've been talking about over the last several weeks and really get into the planning phase of developing strategy. So we've talked a lot about in this class what it means to be a strategic thinker, what it means to understand your core capabilities of your company, and to understand that you have to, before you can move forward with a strategy plan, you have to understand what you're good at, what your competitors are doing, and things of that nature. So we'll get into strategic planning today, in this video, and we will go from there. So strategic planning. Strategic planning is an organizational management activity that is used to set priorities, focus energy and resources, strengthen operations, ensure that employees and other stakeholders are working toward common goals, establishing agreement around intended outcomes and results, and assessing and adjusting the organization direction in response to a changing environment. So basically, it's taking all the things that we talked about before, your resources, your people, your technology, your stakeholders, your executives, everybody on board to work towards the same strategic goal or plan. Strategic planning is a disciplined effort that produces fundamental decisions and actions that shape and guide what an organization is, who it serves, what it does, and why it does it, with a focus on the future. So strategic planning is setting forth the path of a company. Again, you develop your strategy, you develop your goal, and now it's the time to identify how you're going to get there, what does it take to get there, and what kind of forward path is your company going to take to get there in that strategic plan. Effective strategic planning articulates not only where an organization is going and the actions needed to make progress, but also how it will know if it is successful. So tonight we're going to talk a lot about measuring performance. So in strategic planning and developing strategy, you have to know how you're going to get there, what you're going to do to get there, what resources and technology or people you need, but it's also how do you measure success in your strategy? You have to find what, KPIs, what metrics, what are your tangible goals that you're going to work towards to understand whether or not your strategy is successful or not. In a strategic plan, it's an overall document used to communicate with the organization the organizational goals, the actions needed to achieve those goals, and all of the other critical elements developed during the planning exercise. So a strategic plan is basically your business plan. It's your blueprint, it's your outline, it's your comprehensive roadmap on what you're going to do to implement your strategy. So the fundamental steps of developing a strategic plan. Keep this in mind when you're doing your second project as a group. Come back to this video lecture and this PowerPoint, because these are the key things you need to do to develop your strategic plan. First, an analysis or an assessment, where an understanding of the current internal and external environments is developed. We talked about that so far in this semester of a SWOT analysis, a capabilities analysis, all those different types of assessments to find out where your company's current core capabilities are, what are you good at, where do you currently sit in the industry, and what's your current position in the market. The second fundamental step is a strategy formulation, where high-level strategy is developed and a basic organization-level strategic plan is documented. So this is really when you go to the whiteboard as a group and you start jotting down the overall idea about what you're going to do in your strategy plan. What are the next steps? What are the things I'm going to look into doing? It's not the overall formalized plan. It's where you're going to start. It's the brainstorming session of developing your strategic plan. The third step is strategy execution, where the high-level plan is translated into more operational planning and action items. So after you develop and formulate your strategy and understand the overall components of your plan, you're then going to go into the execution phase, which really is project 3. So after you develop your plan, it's then, after it's set in stone, you understand what direction you're taking. It's the execution of that plan, actually going out and getting it done. And then at the very end of that is evaluation or sustainment, the management phase, where ongoing refinement and evaluation of performance, culture, communications, data reporting, and other strategic management issues occurs. So basically, after you execute your plan, how are you going to measure success? How are you going to recap and review how your strategy is performing? So once you roll it out, once you execute it, you want to make sure you're monitoring it to adjust it if it's needed based on business dynamics. If it didn't reach the goals that you had set forth, do you have to do something to, pivot that and go in a different direction? Or if you're successful, what else do you need to monitor to make sure you're continuing that success? So if you read the article this last week, you understand there's something called the strategy to performance gap. At the very core of what this means, it means that basically a lot of companies, after they execute their business plan or strategy, they're not measuring performance. They're not looking at the results and understanding if the results are negative or positive. So there's a gap in a lot of companies today that exists where they execute a strategy, the big idea, and just wait to see what happens after a certain period of time, and they're not checking it along the way. So, for example, you could kick off a whole new marketing strategy about a brand, a whole new logo, a whole new campaign to attract new customers, and your goal in a year is to acquire 100,000 new customers for your company. Well, if you're that company who just executes the strategy and waits a year to see the results and doesn't do anything in that year to monitor it, to see how many new customers you're getting on a weekly or monthly basis, and not assessing your strategy to see if you need to shift the marketing campaign or do something different if you're not on track for your goal, that's that gap. It's not doing anything between the end result timeline you've established versus the beginning of the execution. It's that in-between period of understanding where your peaks and valleys, how am I trending, how's this strategy tracking, and that's very important because it doesn't exist in some companies today, believe it or not. They have a challenge when it comes to measuring their performance. The second bullet point there is why this occurs sometimes. In some cases, in some strategies for some companies, this shortfall is due to unrealistic plans. That is, the results embedded in a manager's projections or what they perceive the result to be simply cannot be achieved no matter how well the team executes. Basically, it's an unrealistic goal. It's not tangible. It's too far out reaching. They can't actually achieve that no matter what they do in their strategy planning. So when you build your strategy and you develop your goals, what are you trying to work towards? What number? What is the overall intent of your strategy? You need to have realistic plans and goals so you can measure it along the way to make sure it makes sense. In other instances, the shortfall stems from the breakdowns in execution. So if you fail to implement your plan correctly, then you're going to have a failure in your results. It's pretty straightforward. But again, it's monitoring it along the way to understand if you can catch the issues early on in your execution phase, you may be able to go in and do something different to pivot your plan and still get back on track. The fourth bullet point, closing the strategy to performance gap can be a significant source of performance improvement for most companies. But before action can be taken to narrow that gap, executives must first understand its size and root cause. So executives or the leaders or the people who can make decisions to alter a strategy plan in the middle of its execution phase, they need all the information. What is the root of the issue and what do they need to know to fix that issue? So page 212 of the book highlighted 7 rules for strategy planning and execution. Number 1, keep it simple. You want to make sure that your overall goal and plan is simple in nature. Now, it might be complex to execute, but the overall goal should be straightforward, a qualitative or quantitative goal that can be easily said in a quick 5-minute elevator speech to whoever's listening to say, I want to achieve X by X year, and I want to achieve this by doing this. Keep it simple to make it tangible and something that you can work towards. Number 2, challenge assumptions. Very important to strategy planning and execution is that you make assumptions when you're doing your development of your plan. You analyze your variables, you analyze your risks, but you challenge those too. Can I overcome this potential obstacle? What do I need to do to overcome the barriers that are going to prevent me from executing my plan? That's very important to challenge those assumptions. Number three, it says speak the same language. What this means, again, is getting everybody in your organization, all key stakeholders, everybody who's going to be a part of the strategy or is affected by the strategy to speak the same language, buy in on the plan, and understand everything and all the parameters it takes to execute the plan. 4, discuss resource deployments early. You don't want to wait down the road in the execution phase of a plan and say, oh, I really should have invested more into this technology, or I really should have understood that I needed more individuals in this department to execute these particular jobs. You know, while things will come up in the execution phase you don't realize, you need to develop and discuss early on as much as you can what resources, whether people or technology, it's going to take to execute your strategy. Number 5, identify priorities. What are the first, second, third, fourth milestones I need to achieve along the way to execute my strategy? Priorities are going to be something that you have to agree upon amongst your team and leadership. It's something you work towards in the execution of your strategy. Continuously monitor performance, and that's the theme of this lecture tonight or today, is that no matter what you're doing, you want to have a set of reporting and analysis along the way to understand how you're doing, what are the KPIs and goals that I'm trying to achieve, and how am I tracking towards those goals. And number 7, develop execution ability. Again, lay out your roadmap, make sure you have everything outlined you need to outline, consider all the variables so you have as much of a clear path as possible to execute your strategy plan. 5 common outcomes of strategy to performance gap. So again, going back to that gap between developing your strategy and executing it and not monitoring your performance, that gap in between. Number 1, companies rarely track performance relative to long-term plans. And this is true in my career. I've seen it. We execute a strategy, then we move on to the next. We're so fast-paced in business now that we're developing strategies all the time. So many projects are going on at once. You're juggling multiple projects. You have 3 or 4 big projects you're working on. Each of those you can consider maybe a business plan or a strategy, and you go forward and you're working on the next. You know, it's hard for a lot of companies to come back and analyze the results and then make changes to a plan because it's already too far down that path. It's very important to make sure that you have an individual or a resource or a team who's tracking performance, checking in every month or week or business quarter, whatever is the most healthy timeline to track the performance to make sure that you're on track. Number 2, multi-year results rarely meet projections. What this means is that when you're doing a financial forecast for a sales strategy for that matter, you know, let's say in 3 years you want to grow your company by $10 million. Year 1 you'll get to 5 million, year 2 you'll get to 7, and year 3 you'll get to 10 million. Well, it may not take 3 years to get to 10 million. It may only take a year depending if your strategy is successful or not. Or you're not trending year 1 and year 2, you may need to augment your goal to another 3rd or 4th year to hit $10 million. So that's important. You have to make sure to understand that multi-year projections are rarely met, and you really need to focus more on how do I get there long term versus understanding that it won't take, you know, sometimes it won't take as long as you think, or it could take longer. Number 3, the strategy to performance gap is substantial. Again, the importance is if you're not monitoring performance during the execution of a strategy, during that timeline of your goal, you could end up failing just because you're not monitoring performance. Number 4, performance bottlenecks are frequently invisible to top management, and this is absolutely true. The individuals in the field who are executing the strategy, the day-to-day workers, the day-to-day people who are going to be the ones to truly implement the strategy, at times don't communicate all the way up to executives who don't understand where the problems are. Now, executives will get the reports and the overview of the numbers and how the strategy is being how it's performing, but unless they get the true information of what the hurdles are, they can't do much about it and find ways to break down those barriers and to help the field employees execute the strategy. So, you know, bottoms up communication is important just as well as top down. You know, leaders need to know what's going on in order to help their field workers and lower level employees execute any strategy, because it's all on the leaders to make it happen. Number 5, the strategy to performance gap fosters an underperformance culture. And that's pretty straightforward. If you're not evaluating your performance, you're not going to get the best out of your employees. You're not going to be productive. You're not going to get what you need from your employees if they don't understand where they need to invest their time and resources to ensure that the strategy is successful. So going into these in a little more detail. Number one, companies rarely track performance relative to long-term plans. Very few companies track performance. Top management have difficulty managing budgets if they don't have a sense for long-term projections will be met. So, budgets are set for a year, but they have to work with finance to monitor that budget on a monthly or quarterly basis. So they build a budget, but they can, there's also a budget or a plan, but a forecast. It's hard to forecast if they can't get real-time analytics or real-time performance measurement to see how they're doing. The main catalyst is the waste of business capital by continuing to invest money into unsuccessful or a bad strategy versus investing into good or new strategy. So if you're not monitoring performance, you're not monitoring how the strategy is doing, you're wasting resource time, you're wasting money, you're wasting opportunity for a company to pivot that resource, that capital, that money into finding ways to invest and strengthen that strategy. This leads to a need to track often, monitor, and pivot financial capital investments as necessary. As I just said, reinvesting capital and resources, time and people into pivoting that strategy into a direction that is successful for the organization and to meeting their goals. This is basically reinvesting into a new strategy. Understand the short-term projections and how they will lead into long-term plan. So little gains in the strategy can go a long way. So how you're tracking in the short term will definitely evolve how you perform in the long run. So as we talked about, multi-year projections are rarely met. When companies do track actual performance relative to planned projections over a number of years, what commonly emerges is a picture one of our clients recently described as a series of diagonal Venetian blinds, where each year's performance projections, when laid side by side, resemble Venetian blinds hung diagonally. So if you look to the right, as you read in the article this past week, that looks like Venetian blinds, kind of slanted diagonal blinds you'd have in your home. But that's basically what it is that for this particular example, they had a growth plan year over year above 25%, where the actual performance in the dotted line was just above 5%. This is a very telling figure here that there's sometimes some companies way over promise, way over project what they're going to do, and their actual performance is going to be a lot lower than their plan. What this means is in the year 2000, they projected to do over 25% growth in their performance of return on capital when they only achieved 5%. And then without changing their forecast for the next year, they said, well, we're going to grow higher than 25% and keep going up and up through 2003, above 25%, when in actuality, they barely hit 10% in 2003. This is a company that did not take into account actual performance, and they didn't pivot their forecasting or their budget plans based on that. And while it isn't fun to lower a plan year over year, to say that you're not going to be as successful as you thought you were, it's more realistic and it makes for a much better business planning in the long run. The number 3 and 4 component of the strategy to performance gap is substantial and top management is unaware of bottlenecks. So again, that bottoms up communication from the field employees or the teams executing a strategy up to their executive management. Executive management must be aware of the bottlenecks. Most companies fail to realize their strategy's potential value. According to the article you read, on average, only 63% of potential value was captured due to breakdowns in planning and execution. On average, only 63% of potential value was captured, which means that on average, over the survey that was taking place, 37% of strategies failed, were not providing value, which is fairly significant if you think about it. That means over a third of the respondents in the survey said that their strategies failed because of the lack of communication between management and their field employees. Figure 2 to the right demonstrates the quantitative breakdown of bottlenecks contributed to loss of potential value of a strategy. So what they did is they correlated the quantitative breakdown of bottlenecks, what type of bottlenecks they were, and the overall value lost. So take a look at that for a moment and kind of realize the types of bottlenecks that take place that really impact performance and strategy. Imagine if some of these were communicated better with senior leadership, and senior leadership was able to get into that issue earlier on and fix them, that some of these percentages or actual strategies could have been fixed. Take a look at it for just a moment and then go to the next slide. All right, so we talked a lot about the issues of if you don't track performance while a strategy is in play, what that does. It impacts a lot of things. It impacts resource time. It impacts financial capital. Basically, it's just wasted money, and it really hurts the strategy overall. But how do you close that gap? There are things you can do, businesses can do to really close that gap to ensure that they're tracking performance accurately. And it all relates in kind of a big circle here that one after another relates to each other to make it successful. Step 1 is ground plans and economic reality. Number 2 is using time and level of performance to sharpen plans. Number 3 is convert plans into action and priorities. Number 4 is to monitor performance versus plan in real time. Number 5 is identify and remove real performance bottlenecks. And 6 is build lasting execution disciplines, which really at the end of the day, number 6 encompasses all of the things around it. First step in closing the gap and the strategy to performance gap is ground plans and economic reality. Quite basically, what this means is that the finance department needs to build financial plans, build out the financial goals of a strategy based on the reality of what's going on. They don't need to, develop magical numbers that appear out of nowhere. It's the true responsibility of any accounting, sales, or financial team to build forecasts and budget plans based on reality and not fantasy. Top performing companies who do this ensure that financial assumptions reflect realistic economies of the current market. So what's going on in the market today? How are competitors doing? What does the economy look like? Things of that nature. They use historical performance of the company. So if the company has grown in sales year over year 3 to 5%, don't say that next year it's going to grow 20%. Look at that trend over the last few years and make a realistic assumption it's going to grow, but not leaps and bounds to the year before. And then obviously we talked about competitors. How are they growing? So you should be able to understand that you can grow relative to the market and your competitors. By doing this, it provides top management effective data and insights to make objective decision-making authority. So as long as the financial assumptions are realistic, then top managers, CEOs, chief executives, and even other executives can make sound decisions based on quality data and insights. And while this may seem simplistic, it can often be lost in analysis or transparency in companies. There's a lack of analysis, there's variables not considered, there's flawed data, or unethical financial representation. So just because a company has the greatest analytical tools out there and have some of the smartest analysts or financial gurus in their department doesn't mean that they're always getting the best information. It's because there's variables that aren't considered. There's finance people who don't understand the variables. That's why they need to work with other business entities to find out what other things there are to consider. Flawed data, maybe there's issues with the database that aren't being captured correctly. And then at times there are, companies that want to fudge the numbers, and that's not good. Unethical financial representation, which means that they're reporting numbers that aren't true just to make themselves look like they're successful. And that's not a great business thing to do. There are two types of strategic and financial planning methods. There are others, but these are the two most common ones in how business companies do operate today. And I've been in companies that have done both. Top-down planning versus bottoms-up planning. Now I want you to look at these two graphs in more detail, but in a very simplistic way to describe this. Top-down planning is the finance department And the senior executives, the leaders of the company, are the ones to develop the financial plan and goals for the company, and therefore they just push it out there. And the business teams, the ones who are to execute the financial plan, have no say in what those numbers are, but they have to do whatever it takes to hit those numbers, no matter if they're realistic or not, no matter if the executives don't understand the challenges of the business team. They just have to hit the financial performance goal. This exists today, but is not, in my opinion, the most effective way to build financial plans for a company. Because if the executives at the top don't understand all the challenges going on in the market, if they don't have all the information from all areas of the company, they're going to rely on just straight up financial analytics and not understand all the variables and considerations and assumptions they really should know. That's why bottoms up planning, and when I've done it in my career, has seemed to be more realistic. The goals that we create seem to be achievable, and I've seen success where from the bottoms up, the business teams identify strategic initiatives. They develop their goals and organizational goals and strategies for the upcoming year, the things they're going to do to change the business, to grow the business, to develop new ways of creating revenue. Then from there, they meet with the financial team, the accounting team, to say, here's our business plan. I need your help to do the analysis of all the variables and considerations and put that together in a nice little package financial analysis to take to the senior management so we can both go in there together in kind of an agile teamwork environment and present our strategies, our business plans, and what those financial goals are going to be. And that way we can articulate our vision and our business plan and get the executives to trust us to execute the plan and sign off and approve those financial budgets and plans. Those kinds of companies are where executives really need to trust their employees. Companies that do top-down planning, generally the senior executives may have a lack of trust in their employees to execute a plan or just want complete control over financial plans. Bottoms up allows for everybody to have a fair, equal opportunity to contribute their perspectives and ideas of what kind of numbers or goals the company can achieve. And I've seen that be a little bit easier to achieve realistic goals, but also it shrinks that or closes that strategy to performance gap we talked about. It allows for all metrics, all variables and KPIs to be considered from all viewpoints of the company, and it's a more tangible way of doing business. So that's why top-down planning is very collaborative. It's from the beginning. It's kind of a funnel of the business team, everybody that's involved, the operations department, marketing, even IT, whichever department you're in, and whatever impact you have on a strategy or a plan, you have your viewpoint, you have your say, you have your subject matter experts, your liaisons. Get with the finance team. The finance team's there to take those inputs, understand the market, do their financial analysis, and then work together with the executive team. And all three of these teams work together to develop their performance goals, the KPIs, key performance indicators. So once all three kind of work together, then common goals can be established, and everybody can say they had an equal opportunity to participate and develop the financial plan or goal for the company. So if it's done right, there are 6 strategic planning outcomes that, if done right, can benefit a company. So these can benefit a company if you do that bottoms-up planning. You really close that gap on the strategy to performance evaluation and really monitor your plan and really make that plan as concrete as possible. One, you get better allocation of resources. So if your money's flowing correctly and you're monitoring your performance, executives have more money to invest into the company or in their people to make it a better company long term. 2, it's more audience focused. Your customers are going to resonate when they see a successful strategy in the market. You're going to get a better retention of your customers. You're going to get a better reputation, and you're more focused on the value you're providing for your customers. 3, you're aligned with goals. So as long as you can execute your strategy and plan effectively, everybody's aligned with your goals for the organization, and everybody's working towards a common purpose. 4, you're defining success. Nobody wants to work blindly to understand if what they're doing day in and day out on their job is impactful to the company or not. So once you can define success and what that looks like, everybody can work towards that. Everybody has a clear vision of what success looks like, and it also boosts morale to make people want to work towards what success means. Number 5, it's that aha moment, that achievement moment when you accomplish your goals, when you accomplish your milestones. It feels good, when you accomplish something you set out to obtain. Like right now, your goal is to finish your degree. It's going to be that graduation day or the day you take your last final exam, probably this semester or next semester as a senior, and say, aha, you made a strategic effort to go to college. Believe it or not, you chose to go to college. It's that aha moment. Same thing for a big business project you're working on. Most projects take, months or sometimes years to execute. And once you see the results and you hit your goal, that makes for a successful outcome and it benefits the company. Number 6, it also creates a new culture. Once you start planning this way and developing your teams this way in business, it makes for an agile environment. It also makes for a transformational organizational environment. You can transform your company into a place where people want to work, where goals are shared and success is measured. So three quotes I like to leave you with on this slide is just when you think about strategic planning and you think about group work and you think about being on board with the same vision is, are we better off now than when we started? That's the question you need to ask yourself as you're developing your plan. Are we better off now than when we started is a measurement of your success. There are many roads to Rome, but you need an address and a GPS to get there. So again, you can find multiple ways to get to your strategy, but unless you have a plan, which is your address and GPS, you can't get there. So you need to make sure that no matter how many ideas you have and no matter what you think it takes to get there, you need to take the time to do the analysis and establish your plan. And if you fail the plan, you plan to fail. If you don't plan effectively, you don't follow the guidelines of strategic planning or business planning, there's more than likely you're gonna fail. Success is not just based on luck. People say, a lot of things happen on luck. Well, that's very rare in business. You truly have to plan, because if you don't, you might end up failing. The last section for the lecture is an overview of what trade-offs are versus opportunity cost. We talked about this earlier on in the semester about in any strategy plan, you're going to have a decision to make where you're at a crossroads between going one direction or the other, or making a decision that has a trade-off or an opportunity cost. But they're not the same thing, so let's make sure you understand the difference between a trade-off versus opportunity cost. A trade-off is simply sacrificing one thing to attain another. So for example, an example of this could be, I need to unfortunately lay off 3 people in marketing to obtain the resource capital needed to invest into 4 new positions in IT, because I'm implementing a whole new technology and I don't have enough resource money to hire those new people without laying off someone in marketing, because my company needs this new technology and the IT team to support that. The trade-off is I'm sacrificing the jobs in marketing to obtain talent needed and resources in the direction I'm taking with this technology. And that's a trade-off. And it's not always, hiring and firing. It's also, you can talk about investment. If I invest more money into this technology, the trade-off is that I will hopefully have a better system to operate my business versus being able to invest into people for new talent and fresh ideas. So that's where trade-offs come to effect. So when you're building your strategic plan, you're going to have to evaluate the company or business that you are working on and understand, are there any trade-offs I need to make to gain one thing and sacrifice another? And as you develop those trade-offs, you're actually creating the opportunity cost. So opportunity cost is more financial in nature. Opportunity cost is the path not taken in the trade-off decision. So it's, what am I not getting in return for doing this trade-off? So again, if I'm letting go of people in marketing to hire people in IT, well, again, the trade-off gain is that I'm going to get more resources to implement this new technology, but the opportunity cost is I'm not going to have these people in marketing, who can really oversee a certain piece of the marketing function, and potentially the opportunity cost is I won't have great of a branding campaign, or I won't have as much knowledge and how to work on social media. So it's kind of one of those things is what are you gaining versus the opportunity cost of what you're losing. And it's the value aspect as well. In strategic planning, you are often faced with some sort of trade-off or decision for a trade-off. And it is important to understand what opportunity cost is associated. You need to know your opportunity costs, especially when seeking financial performance approval for a plan. Executives will want to know and not miss not only what they're gaining, but what they could be missing because of it. I have been in many executive presentations where I present a plan or a business idea, and they first want to know, well, why are you doing it? What's the benefit of this? What am I going to gain from this? But also they understand, are savvy enough to know what am I offsetting? What am I going to lose because of this? There's a lot of the time when you develop a business plan or a strategy, you're going to end up losing something to gain another. It's a balancing act. There's no one way to get something without having to, trade off for another. You got to spend money to make money. It's pretty straightforward. There are 8 common reasons why trade-offs occur in strategy planning. The first one is short-term profits versus long-term growth. So if you're looking to make some short wins in your profitability and not worrying about top line or revenue over a long period of time, you can go ahead and keep your pricing high, not really mark it down, not really discount it, and just keep your products out there so you can make some quick profit, quick wins on the bottom line, especially if you're struggling to maintain a profit or meeting your profitable goals. But as you know, the lower a price is, the more volume and long-term growth there could be for that as well. So that's a trade-off you're willing to make. Profit margins versus competitive position. So again, just because you're in retail, for example, just because Walmart is discounting the price of something doesn't mean you need to discount it too. You want a price match, but you may lose some customers, but you'll win back in profit if you keep your standard price. Direct sales effort versus market development effort. So market development is more of a long-term. You're building something out. You're developing, an opportunity to go into new markets. But direct sales effort means you're focused just on the market you're in today. So if you're a regional retailer, for example, I'll use retail for a lot of these examples. If you're a retailer only in the Northeast, over in New York, New Jersey, and you only have about 100 stores, but you have the opportunity to evaluate if you want to broaden across the country. Let's say you decide not to focus on that. You really just want to impact sales and drive sales and customers to your 100 stores in the Northeast. Well, that's a trade-off. You're developing your time and resources into that versus saying, well, maybe I can pivot some of those resources and develop a plan to grow across the country, which will take longer of an ROI. It's a lot of investment to do that. Or do I just want to focus and really strengthen my current store base, because that's what's going to give me the trade-off right now is I can only invest into my current store base. And that actually relates into the next one too. It's another way of looking at it. Penetrating of existing markets versus development of new markets. Same thing. Am I looking to stay within my current market environment and not broaden my horizons? And that doesn't even mean like storefronts. That can also mean products. Same as the one before that is, am I looking to keep the current product I have now and not develop a whole new version of it next year? Can this product last me 3 to 5 years? And do I really just want to continue to find ways to market it and sell it? Or do I want to find ways to evolve the market, evolve this product into something better and different? It kind of depends on your industry, but that's what the trade-off decisions you have to make. The next one, related versus non-related new opportunities as a source of long-term growth. So, in some companies, they're really known for certain things, 1 or 2 types of products. Well, let's say a company wants to go into a whole new category, something they're not known for. That's a decision you have to make. You can take that business risk and get into something new, or just find a way to stay with what you're known for. It's a trade-off. Do you stay with what you're known for and keep your current customers happy, or do you want to develop a whole new vision for a new product that'll obtain new customers? That's a trade-off decision. Profit versus non-profit goals. We kind of touched on that earlier. Are you looking to make profit versus long-term revenue? And then are you looking for long-term profit versus short-term? Growth versus stability. Are you okay with the status quo? Are you okay with kind of just growing a little bit, 1 or 2% year over year? Or do you really want that growth spurt of 10 to 20% year over year? But are you okay with just paying the bills and not having to really grow as much? If you're a small business versus a large business, those are kinds of things you look at. A small business probably wants to grow quicker, or a large business is okay with just slow growth over time. And the last one, a risk-less environment versus a high-risk environment. Are you okay with the fact that you're in an environment that's got a lot of policies and a lot of rules, a lot of regulations? It may take longer to do business that way, though. The more policies you have, and they call it red tape, may take longer for you to go to market faster or to execute your strategies faster. Whereas a risk-less environment, or an environment with less risk, less red tape, less policies, you're a little more prone to get to your strategy faster, do business faster, but you're more at risk of some type of either legal issue or some barrier in the market. So these are 8 common trade-off reasons, general reasons why companies or business teams need to understand where the trade-offs are. You may be faced with one or all of these when you do your projects, so it's good to understand what each one means. And I would definitely reference this lecture back whenever you're doing your project planning on project 2 and 3 to understand what the common trade-offs are. This discussion activity at the bottom here would have been done if we were in class. Feel free to do it though if you like. Just kind of review it. Something might help you understand trade-offs better, but I'm not going to ask you to do this discussion activity. Obviously, if we're not in class in person, this is a video lecture. Please do post your feedback though of this video lecture in your reading. What did you think about trade-offs? What kind of trade-offs do you think exist in the market today for a lot of companies? Or pick a company if you want and talk about a trade-off you feel like they recently made. And then what did you get about strategic planning? Name 1 or 2 things you felt that you learned tonight or in this lecture about strategic planning. I look forward to your discussion recaps, and don't forget your reflection papers also due on October 1st by 5 p.m. Please email it to me. Again, we also don't have class October 1st, so please do understand that we'll have another video lecture next week. But other than that, have a great week. I'll reconvene with everybody on October 8th. We will have class in person on October 8th. It is your midterm. Please bring your books, your laptop, a pen, and I will provide the midterm to you. I will provide the midterm prep next week's video lecture, and that'll give you an overview of what to study. Other than that, have a great week, and I will talk to everybody soon. Bye-bye.